Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some malicious compliance stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who thought their wants should override everyone else's boundaries. One involves an ex-wife who expected her stepson to risk his safety driving her daughter through an ice storm. Another, a woman who showed up at a stranger's door demanding money her husband gave away. And the last, a mother who physically attacked a nurse while her injured son watched. Here we go. 2 of my kids moved out because of favoritism. My ex still doesn't get it. I'm 45 and share 3 kids with my ex-wife Dee. We divorced 10 years ago and she remarried 2 years later. Between the 2 of us, there are now 6 kids involved in the blended mess. Our 3 together, 16-year-old male, 14-year-old male, and 11-year-old female, her new husband's daughter who's 14, and their shared 7-year-old. On paper, it sounds manageable. In reality, it's been a slow burn of resentment and favoritism that finally exploded this winter. My kids have never gotten along with their stepsister, Ava. From the beginning, it was clear she was treated differently. She's always had her own bedroom and her own bathroom at Dee's house. Meanwhile, my daughter had to share a room with her 2 brothers for years. When my daughter asked why, Dee brushed it off with, "It's just easier this way." That easier always seemed to benefit one child and inconvenience the others. Ava also developed this expectation that everyone should bend to her schedule. If she had an activity, my kids were expected to adjust. If she wanted something picked up or dropped off, someone else had to accommodate it. My boys tried to ignore it for years, but things escalated during the last 2. About a year and a half ago, my oldest asked to live with me full-time. A few months later, his younger brother followed. That alone should have been a wake-up call for Dee, but it wasn't. In December, my oldest turned 16. I bought him a car, nothing flashy, just something reliable to get him to school and work. The only condition I gave him was that he take his brother and sister, my kids, to school when they were with me. He agreed without hesitation. His school's on the way, so it wasn't a big ask. Not long after he got the car, Dee started pushing. "It would be easier if he just picked Ava up too," she said over the phone one evening. "She goes to the same school." I told her, no, he's not her chauffeur. She argued that her neighborhood was technically on the route. I reminded her that technically doesn't mean obligated. My son refused as well. Dee tried to pressure me into forcing him. I refused again. That should have been the end of it. Last month, we got hit with a winter storm. The forecast originally said it wouldn't be too bad, so school wasn't canceled. By mid-morning, the weather shifted fast. Ice started building up, and the district decided to let out early. My sons walked toward the student parking lot with a friend to head back to my house. Ava was standing near my son's car with one of her friends. She was on her phone and looked irritated. "Mom says she can't come get us," she told my son. "We need to ride with you." He said no. She shoved her phone at him. Dee was on the line. "You will give your sister and her friend a ride," she demanded. "I'm across town and I'm not turning around." My son calmly told her no. He explained he wasn't responsible for Ava or her friend. Dee started raising her voice. Ava joined in, yelling at him in the parking lot. He handed the phone back and said, "Not happening." When he and his brother got into the car, Ava and her friend stepped in front of it. They literally blocked him from pulling out. He honked once, they didn't move. He honked again and told them to get out of the way. Eventually they did, and he left. A teacher saw the whole thing. Later that evening, I got a call from the school administration asking what happened. We explained the situation honestly. They made it clear my sons weren't in trouble, but suggested we work out the family conflict. That phrase stuck with me. Dee and her husband called shortly after, furious. "This is your fault," she said immediately. "You're teaching him to be selfish." I'd held my tongue for years. That day, I didn't. "It's not my fault you raised an entitled brat who thinks the world owes her." I said, "I've warned you about this behavior for years. You ignored it. That's on you." Her husband chimed in, accusing me of creating division. I cut him off. "You both enabled this. My sons left your house because they were sick of it. That should have told you something." Dee tried to pivot back to the storm. She could have been stranded. "She had a phone," I replied. "You chose to go grocery shopping during a storm instead of being available. That's not my son's responsibility." Things escalated from there. I said things I probably should have filtered, but they were true. "Until you stop prioritizing one kid over the others, I don't want to hear it. Your sons don't want to live with you. That's not because of me." That's the truth she's been dodging for years. 2 of her kids chose to leave. Not because you poisoned them, not because you bribed them, but because you couldn't take the favoritism anymore. She's been telling herself it's your fault. The silence on the other end of that call was the sound of that story finally breaking. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds before she hung up. I haven't spoken to her since. My boys have been calmer since the incident. If anything, they feel like someone finally backed them up. The only one I worry about is my daughter, who still splits time between households. Tension's thick over there now. She's old enough to see what's happening, and I hate that she's stuck in the middle. I didn't raise my son to be unkind. I raised him to have boundaries. There's a difference. He agreed to help his siblings. He never agreed to become transportation for someone who treats him like hired help. Storms come and go. What sticks is how people act when things don't go their way. And if Dee's still wondering why 2 of her kids chose to leave, she might want to start there. And our second story. You took money from my kids. The wife of the man who paid 0 child support for 19 years screaming at me for keeping a check he left. My father left when I was just 2 years old. Not the dramatic, tearful goodbye kind of leaving. He just walked out on my mom and me and never looked back. He refused to pay child support, and when the state tracked him down, he quit his job so there would be nothing to garnish. At one point, he chose to sit in jail rather than pay what he owed. Eventually, my mom stopped fighting it. She said it felt like pouring time and money into a black hole, chasing someone who would rather burn his own life down than contribute to his child. Growing up, he was a ghost. I saw him once when I was 8 at a court appearance, but we didn't speak. I remember sitting in a hallway outside a courtroom while adults argued about money that never materialized. After that, he disappeared again. My mom worked 2 jobs at times. She missed school events because she had to, not because she wanted to. We made it work, but it was never easy. A couple of years ago, I found out he'd moved about an hour away from where we live. That was the first time I'd even heard his name in years. Apparently, he'd remarried and had more kids. I learned this from my paternal aunt, who's always been blunt about her opinion of him. She told me he'd reached out to her wanting to reconnect. She told him exactly where he could go. She never forgave him for abandoning me and refusing to support me financially. Then in December, my aunt called and said, "Your father stopped by." That alone made my stomach twist. I hadn't seen him since that court hallway when I was 8. She said he left an envelope for me. She didn't know what was inside, just that it had my name on it. I drove over that same day to pick it up. I opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a check. Not a token amount, not an apology letter with 20 pounds tucked in. It was a big check. I just stared at it for a minute, trying to process what I was looking at. My aunt whistled low and said, "Well, that's something." All those years of nothing, then a check big enough to make your aunt whistle? No letter, no apology, just money? He couldn't face you, but he could leave an envelope. That's a choice, too. My first instinct was to give it to my mom. I drove straight to her place and put it on the table in front of her. "This should be yours," I said. "You're the one who did everything." She looked at it, then at me, and pushed it back across the table. "No," she said firmly. "He owed you. He abandoned you. That money is the least you deserve." I argued. I told her she'd carried the burden alone for years. She refused to take it. "I didn't do it for him," she said. "I did it for you. Keep it." After confirming with the bank that the check was legitimate and not some twisted prank, I deposited it into my account. I didn't spend it immediately. It just sat there, a strange lump of unresolved history in numerical form. A week later, things got ugly. My aunt called and said my father's wife had shown up at her house looking for me. I wasn't there that day, and my aunt told her to leave. Apparently, the woman had demanded to know where I was and insisted that the check had been a mistake. My aunt told her to take it up with her husband and shut the door. A few days later, I happened to be at my aunt's house when she showed up again. She knocked loudly and stepped back like she expected a confrontation. When my aunt opened the door, the woman tried to push past her. "I need to speak to her," she said, pointing at me. I stayed seated at the kitchen table. "You can speak from there," I replied. She didn't waste time. "That money was meant for my children," she snapped. "You had no right to drain their accounts for you." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Your husband chose to give me that check," I said. "I didn't ask for it." "You took money from my kids," she continued. "That was their savings." "It wasn't theirs," I said. "It was his. She scoffed. You're 21 years old. You don't need it. That line almost made me laugh. I didn't need him either, I replied, but here we are. She turned red. You're selfish and entitled. He has a family now. My aunt stepped forward then. She was his family first, she said sharply, and if you don't leave, I'm calling the police. The woman glared at both of us, but eventually left. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, she came back again, this time pounding on the door and shouting. My aunt didn't hesitate. She called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, the woman had left, but the officers took a statement. Apparently, she'd been telling people that I stole money from her children, that I manipulated my father into giving it to me. The truth is, I haven't spoken to him, not once. He left an envelope at my aunt's house and disappeared again. I don't know what motivated him, guilt, fear, a sudden flash of conscience. I haven't tried to find out. What I do know is this. He owed years of support, years of missed birthdays, school supplies, rent, food, and stability. No check can rewrite that history, but it also doesn't belong to the woman who chose to build a life with someone who abandoned his first child. If she's angry, she should take it up with him. I didn't chase him for money. I didn't demand anything. He made a choice. For once, it wasn't the choice to walk away. She can call me selfish if it helps her sleep at night. The money's in my account, legally deposited, and I didn't steal a thing. If anyone feels shortchanged, maybe they should start with the man who refused to pay a penny for 19 years. And our last story. Karen attacked me in the hospital. I work in an emergency department and have dealt with my fair share of stressed parents, panicked patients, and people who don't handle hospitals well. That's normal. What isn't normal is being physically attacked while trying to clean gravel out of a teenager's knees. One evening, a woman brought her teenage son into the ER after he wiped out on a skateboard. He'd scraped both knees badly. One of them was dislocated. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was painful and messy. While they waited for the doctor to reset his knee, I was assigned to clean and prep the wounds. There was dirt and small bits of gravel embedded in both knees, so I needed to flush and disinfect them properly before they could be dressed. I introduced myself and explained what I was about to do. The boy looked nervous but cooperative. As I started setting up my tray, his mother abruptly raised her voice. "You need my permission before you give my child first aid," she snapped. I paused and looked at her. "Excuse you?" "I didn't sign any waivers giving you permission to treat my son," she said, arms crossed tightly over her chest as if she just caught me committing a crime. I kept my tone even. "You signed consent for treatment when you completed the intake forms at registration." She stomped her foot like a toddler and scoffed, "Fine." I took a steady breath and focused on the task. The boy's knees were in rough shape, and I could tell he was bracing himself. When I began cleaning the wounds with antiseptic, he winced and clenched his jaw. "I know it stings," I told him gently. "Try your best to hold still. I'll be as quick as I can." He nodded, clearly uncomfortable, but trying to cooperate. I flushed the gravel out carefully, then applied antibiotic ointment with a sterile swab, taking care not to irritate the skin any more than necessary. The last thing he needed was more trauma layered on top of the injury. Once the wounds were clean, I placed non-stick gauze pads over each knee and wrapped them with a sports bandage so they'd stay secure but not overly tight. My head nurse stepped in to double-check the dressings. She examined both knees and gave me a nod of approval before calling in the doctor to prepare for the reduction of the dislocated knee. I began clearing away the used supplies and disposing of the waste. That's when everything went sideways. Without warning, the mother shoved me out of the way. She physically put her hands on me and pushed hard enough that I stumbled. Before I could react, she lunged toward her son and started ripping the bandages off his knees. He screamed, "Mom, what are you doing?" It happened so fast that my brain barely kept up. One bandage came off in a split second, tearing at freshly cleaned skin. I moved instinctively, grabbing her by the shoulders and pulling her back. She struggled immediately, trying to shove past me again. I pinned her against the wall with one arm and reached for my radio with the other. "Security to room 3, now," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. She flailed and managed to tear one dressing completely free before I restrained her fully. Her son was crying, watching the chaos unfold in front of him. Within moments, 2 security officers entered the room. They're not just mall guards in our hospitals, they are uniformed officers with proper authority, equipped and trained. They grabbed her arms and pulled her away from me. she didn't go quietly. She kicked and screamed, even attempting to strike one of the officers. That was a very bad decision. Assaulting hospital security here is treated as assaulting law enforcement. The hospital director arrived shortly after. Alerted by the commotion, he took in the scene. A crying teenager, one bandage ripped off, officers restraining a hysterical woman, and me standing there trying to calm my breathing. "What's going on?" he demanded. I explained clearly she assaulted me and attempted to rip the dressings off her son's wounds. One of the female officers stayed in the room with us while the others escorted the mother out. The boy was visibly shaken. I knelt beside him and reassured him that he was safe and that we would redress his knee properly. The doctor reset the dislocation once things settled, and we applied fresh dressings carefully. The boy apologized to me through tears. I told him he had nothing to apologize for. That moment right there, the boy apologizing, tells you everything. He was the one in pain, the one whose own mother just made everything worse, and he's the one saying sorry. She wanted control. She just wanted his knees fixed. His mother, meanwhile, was placed in a holding room at the hospital until patrol officers arrived. She was charged with assaulting a healthcare worker, 2 counts of assaulting an officer, child endangerment for interfering with medical care, and disturbing public order. Here, those charges are not symbolic. They carry real consequences. I've dealt with rude patients. I've dealt with loud parents. But physically shoving a nurse and tearing medical dressings off your injured child crosses a line most people wouldn't even think to approach. The part that still sticks with me isn't her shouting or her entitlement. It's the look on that boy's face as security dragged his mother out of the room. Hospitals are chaotic enough without someone deciding that consent forms don't apply to them and that violence is an acceptable parenting strategy. She wanted control. What she got was handcuffs. 3 people who confused their wants with rights. Story 1. Dee spent years treating one child differently while pretending fairness existed under her roof. 2 sons left. The third watches from the middle. When a winter storm hit and her daughter blocked a car in a school parking lot, she expected the son who already moved out to risk icy roads for her convenience. He said no. She called him selfish. She's still looking for someone else to blame. Story 2. The father's wife spent years building a life with a man who had a child he never mentioned. When he wrote that check, she didn't ask why. She didn't question him. She drove to a stranger's door and screamed about theft because that narrative was easier than admitting she married someone capable of abandoning his own child for 19 years. Story 3 wins because of that boy. He was the one in pain, the one needing care, the one watching his mother make everything worse. She didn't see him. She saw a chance to prove she was in control. The nurse saw him. She knelt beside him, redressed his wounds, and told him he had nothing to apologize for. That's the difference between entitlement and care.